Good Friday afternoon, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille Show. Thank you kindly for joining us. We're live in Charlottesville, across the Commonwealth, the country, and the world on the I Love CVille Network. Today's show is going to be an impactful one. It's material that undoubtedly impacts the community we live in. We're going to discuss the termination of Police Chief Brackney. This happened Wednesday afternoon. City Manager Chip Boyles terminated Chief Brackney's contract late Wednesday afternoon, and since then it has been the talk of town. We have Bellamy Brown, which we will get to in T-minus 15 seconds, the chairman of the Police Civilian Review Board. We also have Councilor Lloyd Snook about 1 o'clock on the show. Judah Wickhauer is our director. Let's go to the studio camera first, and then let's welcome the dapper Bellamy Brown to the set. Mr. Brown, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
Doing well. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. We're going to start open-ended.
Sure.
Wednesday afternoon, Police Chief Brackney terminated by City Manager Chip Boyles. Mm-hmm. Open-ended question and update from the chairman of the Police Civilian Review Board, sir.
Oh, what's the question?
Anywhere you want to go on this topic here. Your thoughts when you read the termination news?
I thought that it was appropriate, and I recognize that I and City Manager Boyles, in addition to maybe a few other folk, have more information than what the limited public information that's out there. And I have a background in human resources, employment litigation, and also executive leadership. And all of those experiences informed my assessment of how this, should have carried out. And so, I 100%, if I were in the position, that I would have done the same thing.
Chief Brackney spent more time in the office than Al Thomas, certainly a lot less time than Tim Longo. Mm-hmm. We're now searching for the CEO of the police department, the police chief. A national search is happening. Chip Boyles acknowledged that. When rank and file, the backbone of the department, is refusing to follow leadership, that's a concerning sign. We're both sports guys. You grew up playing team sports. When team members are not motivated or willing to follow the coach, the general manager, changes happen in the front office or on the sidelines.
Sure.
Is that a similar situation that you're seeing here in the police department?
I don't want to baby the situation by saying whatever the analogy that you use about not following. I think that ultimately, and I think a lot of people in leadership have known throughout the community that this was a serious situation. For me, I've gotten questions. Oh, why'd you help the police? Yada yada yada. And I've explained this recently. My representation as the chairman of the Police Civilian Review Board is ultimately to represent the community members, the citizens of this community. What I recognize, and this is again coming from my experience, what I recognize is that the community itself was in a weak position, and then you have this subset, this other group of employees that had a stronger position. And in addition, they had their information tightly packaged that could be readily deliverable. So, as an advocate, there's no, as a smart advocate, trying to advocate on behalf of folk that are not getting attention to begin with, but want to accomplish similar goals, you have to go where the stronger position is, and kind of go from there. And so that's what I chose to do based on not just information from police officers, but information from community members, information from other areas within local government as a whole. And one of the things that as a Marine you either learn to lead or you learn to follow. And when I didn't see any leaders taking the charge on this position, naturally rose to take that post because I felt that it needed to be done. From a board perspective, I know that we try to get labeled as anti-police and all these other things to try and undermine the work that we're trying to do. But I've worked with these board members for some time, and we've put in a lot of volunteer hours to try and bring something to the forefront to represent members of this community. And I'm not, again, I come from, I'm from here, but I spend a lot of my time in the DC environment, where it's always, go, go, go. What have you done for me yesterday? There has to be a deliverable. We didn't come here to volunteer on this board to not have a deliverable at the end of the day, or to have, some type of obstruction that doesn't need to be there. And so I'm like, I'm not going to go home with, empty volunteer hours and nothing else. Like, if there's significant problems, if you hear there's a problem, and nobody ever does anything about it, that's a serious, that's an even greater problem. And I'm a problem solver. In my career, that's what I've been, that's what I've done. And so that was just natural to me. And so, I took the steps to make that happen.
You have a handful of Charlottesville police officers watching and Albemarle County police officers watching. When did Chief Brackney start losing the team members, the morale? Is there an incident or a timeline that you can pinpoint? Is this been snowballing?
So I'm I'm still meeting with officers. I met with another this morning, and from that officer's recollection, it started pretty significantly early on, and again, I believe that there is requests made to address the matter. And it fell on deaf ears, and it went nowhere. So, from my understanding, pretty early on.
Was this a my way or the highway type of mentality from the leader of the department?
The information that I've gotten would kind of align with that in some respect. Again, I'm saying, obviously third party. This is just the information that I've gotten. I'm not saying yay or nay because I wasn't there, but from the information that I've gotten, it would align with that.
City Manager Chip Boyles terminates her. We find out about it Wednesday afternoon late through a very short press release. The press release that was issued last week,
sure,
the very long one, that did not have a signature associated with it, that was talking about, with lack of, I'll cut to the chase, secrets, inside convos and information, topics that probably should have stayed within the police department, were made very, very, very public.
Sure.
Do we know who penned, wrote, created the press release from last week? Is that Chief Brackney's work? Is it Mayor Walker's work?
I cannot speak one way or the other for that.
It was somebody with inside information.
Sure, and I will say, for me again, I think the way I look at it, everything holistically, an outcome has been achieved. I think there is an avenue now where we look to move forward, ideally in a positive way. So when we're talking about, some of those things that have gone on internally, I think that, again, that will be left to City Manager Boyles and then some of the folk in CPD to kind of address that, because that's not necessarily the only issue. I think there are a number that have to be resolved, but I can't say one way or the other who wrote that.
What have you heard from team members in the police department since the police chief was terminated?
I've heard it's long overdue. I've heard it's relief. There's more work to be done. It's not to say that the top of the head is the sole person responsible. And again, those are things that will be dealt with internally. But that's there's relief, but there's more work to be done.
What do we think of how the termination was handled? Most of the all the city councilors have said this was not their decision to make.
Well, again, this is where I come in, and I think for me, there are things that were, again, that have already been known. There were things that were brought to the attention of leadership, and there's a hands-off approach. We don't get involved in those things. So obviously, that's par for the course. And I applaud, again, City Manager Boyles for taking the correct action. It's not white supremacy or anything like that. It's the correct action based on, if you take color out of the whole thing, and you just look at performance, and you look at organizational management, organizational leadership, it doesn't matter whether you're white, black, or whatever, a competent leader, a competent manager would make the same decision. And that's the way I look at it. That's the way I approach it.
I feel the same. And I just got a text message here from Macy Moores of CBS 19. They're watching the show,
Yeah.
and they would like to Macy would like to come out and literally interview you after this show. Like, literally, you see.
Yeah, I got her
Okay.
text. Yes,
Okay.
that's fine, Mace.
Okay, Macy, he says that's okay. So much I want to get to. Immediately upon the announcement of Chief Brackney's termination, Mayor Walker calls this essentially white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
When you read that, what went through your mind?
It's like it's not white supremacy. Like I'm responsible for this. I had to fight to be able to move this dial forward. Like you have no idea how many white folk had trepidation over this. This is, for me, this is in the best interest of the community, especially the black community, especially when you say things like you can have an unlawful detention, but a real use of force against a black man in this community, and you don't have that authority to do that, that sets a dangerous precedent for the other black men that follow. And I don't care how many people get upset with the fact that I've done this and you're not looking at it, or you just want to yell and do whatever just because that's your role in this community. I'm well beyond that. I'm here to deliver for the people that I've grown up with, that I've spent time around, the black men that I've spent time around in this community, and I'm not going to sugarcoat any of this. This is what needed to be. This is what needed to happen, and if it took some pushing for folk to get there, so be it. But this is not white supremacy. That I did this, so at the very least, spearheaded this. And yeah, I took on partners along the way, but I don't do. There's a problem. We're not going to solve it. There are people's well-being that are involved here, and you can't just sell the whole ship away for one person or a few people. So,
Sounds like NBC 29 is also sending a reporter here to interview you after the show. So this gentleman is going to be on the 6, 10, and 11 o'clock news tonight and tomorrow's Sunrise newscast. What is the feedback or the fallback or some of the heat you've gotten from this? Has there been some?
I don't care about no stinking heat. Like, I mean, most of the people don't have the full information. So you're not, Theodore Roosevelt has this quote about, talking about people in the arena. If you're not in the arena, hey, you don't know all the facts. So I'm not going to get caught up in that. And I still today have this one question for those folk. Who has the authority to say that a black man can be unlawfully detained and have a reasonable force used against him? It's not hers. It's not any police chief's. So that's not, I don't care.
Your thoughts on Mayor Walker's Facebook Live? The majority of it, a good chunk of it, was literally about you. Did you watch it?
No.
Did you hear about it?
I heard about it. I think we're past that. We're past me being concerned about folk not in the arena. We're past me being concerned about naysayers. We're here to deliver for people in this community. And whether you appreciate the effort, that I put forth here in this decision or you don't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to me, because there was enough evidence found to trigger this particular decision, which was the right decision. And that's all I care about.
I'm a huge fan of you. You know that.
Sure.
I did not like one particular comment that came across social from the mayor. And you know what I'm going to reference.
Sure.
You posted a post on Facebook, and she responds to the post, and I believe she's watching the show.
Okay.
She responds to the post by saying, "I don't argue with people who Harriet Tubman would have shot."
Me and Harriet would have been tight.
This is I almost took this as a threat.
I mean,
Did you take that as a threat?
no. I said winter is coming.
You did say that.
So, I'm a Marine. I've been a Marine since I was 17 years old. That hadn't changed. That's not going to change. So, okay. I got things to do. I'm going to deliver for my community. These have been a lot of volunteer hours. So all this BS, this noise, okay, whatever.
You got the Daily Progress, NBC 29, and CBS 19 all on the feed here. Major Mooney.
Okay.
Now helping with the transition.
Mm-hmm.
Major Mooney announces a retirement, and less than, roughly 48 hours, certainly less than 72 hours later,
Mm-hmm.
he comes back on the job.
Mm-hmm.
He, lack of better phrase, rises to the occasion and helps with the transition.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of that?
I don't know. Like I said, I know that there was more than enough information there to arrive at this particular decision on behalf of the city manager. I don't know what went into his, making this decision. But I mean, it is what it is. I think from a continuity perspective, when you have this particular transition, yes, that some kind of existing leadership needs to be there for for the interim until we figure out the path forward and which way to go. But it is what it is.
The Police Benevolent Association,
Mm-hmm.
they have their own survey.
Mm-hmm.
You're privy to the results of the survey.
Mm-hmm.
I'm privy to the results of the survey. How much did that impact the termination of Chief Brackney, that survey?
I'd say not a lot.
Not a lot.
Not a lot.
Please give us some insight.
Well, I mean, that's what it started off with. I mean, it started off with that reading at the PCRB meeting, and it was we'll just say there was not a lot of traction on that.
This was interesting, and by interesting, I almost saw it as inflammatory, speaking at a turn, airing City Hall dirty laundry in a very live Facebook setting where Mayor Walker basically was discussing the executive director position,
Mm-hmm.
a position that many of us in this community thought should have been yours,
Mm-hmm.
and you did not get the position.
Mm-hmm.
And she then, in lack of better phrase, spins it,
Mm-hmm.
saying this is the collateral damage of Mr. Brown not getting the executive director position with the Police Civilian Review Board.
Sure.
Care to offer some comments?
When I joined this board in August of last year, I had police officers approach me shortly thereafter. So all of this information gathering happened well before the position even opened up. What triggered me towards these steps, as I said earlier, like I can either lead or I can follow. And when I saw that there were not enough leaders on this particular issue, that's what I had to do. So I'm not, again, how do you, this is a year, more than a year in the making. Here we are.
Do we see it a difficult position to be filled? I mean, we've had a tremendous attrition and turnover in City Hall. Al Thomas was on the job for a New York minute.
Yeah.
Chief Brackney, she leaves the position somewhat in shambles. I think that's safe to say.
Mm-hmm.
Is this going to be a difficult position for City Manager Chip Boyles to fill?
I don't know. I mean, hopefully there is a qualified leader out there who can, talk to the folk on the ground, who know what's going on inside, and not only address the issues on the inside, but you still got to address city council's issues. You got to address city manager and also the police department. That's going to be some heavy lifting. It's my understanding that the state of the department it'll take some years to be able to fix. So you really need a leader that would be invested in that organization, changing that organizational culture, and kind of remedying some of the things that that were let go. I mean, like I said, I met with another police officer this morning, and there's more than a number of them that are ready to fly off with information. So this isn't, and these are African American folk. So there's more than enough seemingly damage that's out there that has to be addressed.
Should the new police chief, be hired within the department?
I'm not going to get. So my only interest with regard to personnel was where there was a legitimate, problem. Again, looking at it from my HR and employment litigation perspective. So as far as I'm concerned, that's done. The rest of this, as to who needs to be there or what have you, I'll leave that to City Manager Boyles and let him, kind of do his thing from there.
This question's come in the feed. Did the police officers within the Charlottesville Police Department get Chief Brackney fired?
No, why? I don't understand why this is so hard for people to comprehend. This isn't white supremacy. This isn't done, I kicked the door open. I don't know if people recognize that. I did this because I saw a legitimate problem, again, looking through my human resources lens, looking through my employment litigation lens, looking at what, the board is trying to do on behalf of the community, and nobody was stepping up. And again, as a Marine, we either follow or we lead. And on this issue, my card got punched, and it was time for me to lead. So that's what happened. This is no white supremacy or any of that. So it happened. The PBA didn't come into play until roughly about 2 weeks before I was going to make that statement, and I hadn't even fully crafted the statement until maybe a couple days before. And their packaging was in such a way, and had already been disseminated in such a way that it allowed greater leverage to be able to get the point across as a whole. And so I saw synergy there. For what we're looking to accomplish overall for the board, the members of the community, with what they were, what they had, and so I went for it. In this community, and I've said it over and over again, we've been in a space where white folk are scared to be called racist.
That's very true.
And so it paralyzes folk, or it has paralyzed folk, and I don't have time for that. You can't call me racist. You can't say whatever. You can say whatever, but I don't care. But you can't call me racist and try to make this about race. This isn't about race. This is about an organizational management and leadership issue that affects the community, or that affected the community, and it just needed to be addressed.
Toughest question I'm going to ask you. Is the mayor of Charlottesville weaponizing race?
I don't like to comment a lot about, the mayor of Charlottesville. She's free to do whatever it is that she wants. I'm concerned about doing what's in the best interest of the community, and so that's what I'm going to focus on doing. I will say again, for me, Juan Wade and Brian Pinkston are it for me, especially Brian Pinkston coming up with, his support of the PCRB with investigatory and disciplinary power, in addition to making sure that we, as a board, survive and have the resources that we need. And that's the kind of, leader that I want. That's the kind of leader, as chairman of the PCRB, that's what I want. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear people that are going to support this. And obviously, from this situation, you can see the value of the PCRB, not just from a community perspective, but also from a policing perspective. So all the folk that are out there that were saying we're anti-police, what do you make of this? Folk that, if you support the police, this is a clear reason of why you should support us and what we do. So,
you are a stakeholder, an influencer, a citizen, a taxpayer. Your thoughts on Chip Boyles, the city manager, and the job he is doing. This could not have been an easy decision for him to make. A man that is somewhat new to the job, a white man, firing a black woman.
Yeah. See, that's I think if you're going to look at it from that perspective. Again, we go back to that race perspective. This isn't about race.
It's about performance in your eyes.
This is about performance. This is about the effect on the organization as a whole. And how that translates into effect on the community. And we got to get away from this, it's a white thing, it's a black thing, because that's not, again, I started this. I pulled the trigger on this. while all the white folk were trying to hide behind, I pulled this. So, no.
Councilor Lloyd Snook will join us in a couple minutes here. Your thoughts on council not knowing that this termination was going to happen?
Council has already repeatedly stated we do not get involved in personnel matters. That's it. I mean, simply it.
Janice says, Janice Trevelyan, it's so nice to have someone in a public position in Charlottesville speak intelligently, respectfully, and with the city's best interests. You literally have every media outlet in town watching, and they're coming here to interview you outside of the studio. State of the Union of Charlottesville and City Hall from your perspective. You have more inside knowledge than 99% of the people in this community.
I think obviously the police department is an area that has to be
Prioritized?
prioritized and rectified. I believe that there is some stability that's Manager Boyles is trying to make. I believe that this, with regard to policing in the community, there has to be more efforts in terms of bridging that gap. There has to be more opportunities for community members to raise the BS flag whenever police do mess up and they have negative interactions. And that's kind of what I see at this point. The depth of how deep the dysfunction and what have you in the police department, I don't know that. I've seen enough. I think I made this statement before. The more I see, the less I want to know, and that's very true. I didn't expect any of this when I started this whole endeavor, and it's this is my hometown, and I'm just.
You're passionate about it.
I'm definitely passionate about it. I've been disappointed in that this wasn't taken care of earlier. And of course I care because I still go back to the hood to where, my people are. And I'm not going to, when we look at the economics of where we are in this city, you got, a ton of millionaires around, you got at least 2 billionaires around, and you got the folk at we got 17,000 in poverty in this space. So the economics those aren't favorable for a lot, and a lot of those folk are black. It's not favorable in that space. At the very least, you can make sure that they have the opportunity to call BS when their government is violating their rights or anything like that. So that's what I'm focused on and trying to deliver for them, for us, and just kind of go from there.
3 questions for you left here.
Okay.
This is from multiple people on the feed. And I'm also curious. You've hinted at and alluded to that you have a lot of information that that's not public knowledge or out there. Mm-hmm. When will the community know that knowledge? Will we ever? And how impactful is the knowledge that you have within the department?
As far as I'm concerned, the knowledge that has been provided to accomplish the goal has been, it's done. There are a few miscellaneous things that I will work on, but the rest of it, this could have gone completely differently. This could have been really bad. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm off the trail, and the rest of that is with city leadership.
When you volunteered for chairman of the Police Civilian Review Board, did you ever think the volunteer efforts and the countless hours that you have put into this position would be on behalf of police officers?
No, not at all. And again, I go back to my 2017 incident with a Fairfax County police officer that shook me for at least 6 months afterwards, where I hadn't done anything wrong, and I had to spend the better part of a year fighting, fighting that. So my flavor for police officers wasn't very high, but I recognized in this role I had to be open to seeing everything from a full perspective, and I think that's what it is for me. In executive leadership that I've been in organizations, you got to look at everything across the board. And so here, I don't know if there's some folk that just look at, oh, PCRB, these are just your duties, yada, 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 without looking at the entire landscape and how that fits into everything. And I come from this perspective where you have to look at the entire landscape because some of those things have a factor on everything else. And that's the way that I've viewed it and attacked the issue.
Second to last question for you, and then Councilor Lloyd Snook, guys. This is going to be from Linda Bowen. Before I get to Linda Bowen's comment, you have what I count 13 people saying that you should be on council, and you should have been the one that was elected to council. Linda Bowen says, I thought it was interesting that the Police Benevolent Association board members are all from Albemarle County and one from Waynesboro. Do you think that impacted the survey results at all?
No, because the survey results were, so here we go. Everybody's stuck on this PBA survey. It's not the PBA survey that was a catalyst for this. It was internal, it was the Climate Command Survey, internally, designed by leadership itself. That was the catalyst. And when that wasn't, moving around, that's when the PBA did their survey, and they were more than willing to make that available. Everybody harps on the PBA. Oh, it's the southern states. That's BS. Like, this is a legitimate problem. You got the officers. So the climate survey internally, you got 70 that took it. The PBA, you got 65 out of the 70 that took it, and it's my understanding that the climate survey makes the PBA survey looks like child's play. So everybody wants to get stuck on black and white PBA survey as opposed to looking at the core issue. And fine. Maybe everybody doesn't look at things that way. Maybe everybody wants to look at these hot button issues. That's not what I look at. I look at what's the core issue. How organizationally, what is that? How does that have an impact on everything else? How does that have an impact on what we do as a board? And if there are any impediments that need to kind of be adjusted or moved out of the way, I'm not advocating properly if I don't make an effort to do just that in the best interest of the board and the community as a whole.
Last question for you. It's in regards to this election in early November, 2 open spots on council. An incumbent, Mayor Walker, is running again. Heather Hill is choosing not to run again. Brian Pinkston, Juan Diego Wade, Yaz Washington, and Nakia Walker, the 4 that are running for 2 spots. Mm-hmm. I've said on this show multiple times that this is one of the most important elections in Charlottesville, Virginia history, mm-hmm. and frankly speaking, it's only been amplified by the termination of Chief Brackney. Mm-hmm. We can make a legitimate argument that the folks that are elected in early November will help determine or influence who the new CEO of the police department is going to be. Mm-hmm. We got the future land use map. We got this Delta variant going on. We got school redistrict. We got a hell of a lot of stuff going on right here.
Yeah.
In your perspective, take as much time as you need. How important is this election in early November?
I mean, it's super important. And again, I'm going to come from a perspective of policing and the community. I can never support a police chief that will say that a black man can be unlawfully detained but have reasonable force used against him. Those don't go together. And if you want to support that one person as opposed to the greater community, that doesn't work for me. So I'm going to look for the folk that are going to focus on serving the community and what the community needs and go from there. And for me, that's Brian Pinkston and Juan Diego Wade. Yes, all those other things are vitally important. This is just as important. You can't spend $1 million on some statues, give us $350 in a bucket, and be like, hey, you guys are going to work. We need that support to stand it up properly, make it stable, make it move forward on behalf of the community itself. And that's my aim. That's my effort. As long as I'm on this board and as long as I'm in this position, that's what I'm going to work toward. So these misnomers or this misconception that, oh, well, you went out there and you supported the police as opposed to the community members. That's for folk who are either not looking at the entire picture
or want to spin a narrative.
So
anything else that needs to be out there?
Not that I know of, no. Go vote in November. And yeah, I think I said this early on. If this community wants to move itself in the right direction, it has to address two challenges. One has already been addressed. The other, you can go out and vote in November.
Bellamy Brown, guys. Anything you want to say to Councilor Snook?
Hey, Bellamy.
Councilor Snook is in studio.
Hi, Counselor. We got $350,000. We would hope to get some more. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Seriously, appreciate
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Bellamy Brown, guys, Chairman, Police Civilian Review Board. Councilor Snook, freshly haircutted, Councilor Snook, in studio here. Councilor Snook, you heard some of that interview here with Mr. Brown.
Sure.
Your thoughts on what you've heard?
Well,
And this one here is your camera.
okay. So I guess the one thought that I would offer is that the issue of the police morale, the police chief's performance, these issues were on the radar screen for council and for the city manager before either the PBA survey that came out in the letter of August 10th or Bellamy's statement at the PCRB meeting. It has been a concern for a long time, and a lot of it has to, and let me just back up by saying when Chief Brackney came, there was a lot of immediate grumbling from the ranks, and I chalked that up, a lot of it, to being the good old boy network not liking the fact that they were being told they had to change and being told they had to change by a black woman. And there are a lot of names called that are basically, to me, were basically the complaints of people who didn't like to be told they had to be changing. So I kind of dismissed a lot of that early on. More recently, of course, I've been in office about a year and a half and started hearing, well, actually, let me back up. The real reason, the thing that triggered me to run for council in the first place was at the end of December of 2018, early 2019, there were a couple of newspaper articles that were talking about the fact that nobody in the police department thought that anybody in City Hall had their backs, that they were feeling that they're being beaten up on by council, they were being beaten up on by the public in meetings, city council meetings and so on. And I thought, okay, that's something that I think I might be able to make a contribution on.
And this is a defense attorney talking.
This is a defense attorney. At that point, I'd spent basically 40 years of my life fussing at police officers and accusing them of doing unfair things to my clients and so on. But for me, I always maintained a pretty good working relationship with the officers and with the police department as a whole, and in large part because having seen what they do, I mean, I've probably seen more hours of police video than anybody else in City Hall who isn't in the police department. You know, seeing what my clients have done, what they have done with my clients, in some cases what they've done to my clients, and I'm not just talking Charlottesville, I'm talking Albemarle, Orange, you know, every jurisdiction. I've seen a lot of this stuff, and I have a great deal of respect for what we ask these officers to do. I have a great deal of respect for the restraint that I see them exercising when they're being berated and insulted and kicked at and so on by people who are not, shall we say, at their best at that moment. And so it was with that sense of respect for the difficulty of the job that I want them to do that difficult job well. I want them to be trained well. I want them to be paid well. I want them to be led well. And when those things happen, good things result. That's why I started to run in the first place. So I come into office, and almost immediately I wound up butting heads with Chief Brackney over some issues of dealing mainly with the budget. But that certainly wasn't anything that I was going to say, oh, gee, we've got to fire Chief Brackney over this. It's something to work through. And then, of course, there was the problem tail end of last year with the Unitarian Church incident, where she gives a press conference that correctly defends the officers. I think that the officers were being accused, and I've seen those videos too, the officers were being accused of various forms of discrimination and so
Profiling.
Yeah, when in fact they were responding to a call. And it took about 5 minutes of them dealing with the call and dealing with the contact with the citizen before they realized, okay, this is not the situation we thought we might be responding to. And from there, I thought that the entire incident got sort of blown out of proportion. And I thought that in many ways the investigation and the conclusions that Chief Brackney had come to were right. When she goes off the rails is when she says, and I want the entire Unitarian Universalist Church Board of Directors to resign.
Right. And the minister or the pastor fired.
And the pastor fired, sure.
Yeah.
Clean house over there, which is completely inappropriate. And it was not the first time that something like this had happened. I talked to one person who knew the situation pretty well and knew the chief pretty well, who said that this person had serious doubts about Chief Brackney's ability to demonstrate a sense of grace sufficient to be conciliatory, which I thought was a very perceptive comment at a time when the police needed to be conciliatory. That's not the same as saying they needed to surrender, but they needed to be willing to sit down in the same room and deal with people honestly and deal with people straight up and hear criticisms and respond constructively to the criticisms. And that was the sort of thing that was just very difficult to see publicly. So with that in mind, we move into, through 2000 into 2001. Of course, everything we're doing is constrained by COVID. We can't have the meetings we want to be meeting and we want to be having. And clearly the police department is working under very difficult constraints at that point. So, and we did have a few other issues going on. So things were kind of going along without a lot of attention being paid, but the concern was still there. And I will tell you that the concern was so pronounced during 2020 that I had a number of discussions with folks in, shall we say, senior leadership positions in City Hall that suggested that if it wasn't because of a concern that there'd be political hell to pay, Chief Brackney might have been looking for another job last year. So
Political hell to pay because
of her friendship with the mayor.
Yeah, there's undoubtedly a behind-the-scenes partnership. That partnership was alluded to, the mayor is watching, that partnership was alluded to in her Facebook Live, Mayor Walker's Facebook Live Wednesday evening. Did you know that Police Chief Brackney was going to be terminated by the city manager prior to it happening?
No.
Did anyone on council?
I don't know of anybody. Let me tell you, a number of us, I have a conversation regularly scheduled with the city manager once a week. And he was talking with us and saying, what do you think about this? How are you reading this? He never asked me, do you think I should fire her? Do you think I should keep her? And I never said. I told him, I said a couple things. One is, keep in mind, my general observation after seeing this for a long time is that changing the leadership at the top may seem like the easier solution, but it's not always the best solution to grab for right away. Sometimes it's necessary, but don't make it your first choice. The second thing that I did, I wanted to make sure that the city manager had the benefit of the information that I had received, the contacts that I had had, and whatever opinions I may have. And all I can ever ask is, in a city manager council form of government, where it's the city manager who's in charge of personnel decisions, all I can ever ask is that the city manager be fully informed and that he give due consideration to the issues, to the facts, and to the concerns. And I was satisfied that he was doing so. So Wednesday, when the news came that Chief Brackney was being terminated, or contract was being terminated, I got the news, frankly, from another reporter who had called me on my cell phone at 6:45 to
Get
say,
out. That's how you found out?
that's how I found out. Now, in fairness to Mr. Boyles, he had tried to contact me by cell phone an hour and a half earlier, but I was in another meeting at that point, and I wasn't taking cell phone calls in the middle of my meeting. So, but the point is that it was not a planned out kind of a thing. When I talked to Mr. Boyles about it, one of the things that he mentioned to me was that basically, and now I'm going to sound sort of like, or make him sound sort of like the athletic director who's firing the football coach, it's time to go in a different direction. You don't always have to have a smoking gun to recognize that things have to go in a different direction. You don't always have to have something that's a for-cause reason for termination, which is the reason, by the way, the reason that her contract, which calls for a severance clause, a severance payment if there is no cause, why that severance payment is being made. We're not asserting that there was cause in the sense that if we had to go to court, we would win, but there was cause in the sense that this wasn't working. And sometimes this isn't working has got to be enough. And if we wait until 20 more officers quit, is that enough? At some point, a leader like Chip Boyles has to make a decision.
You're a man of conviction. Should Chief Brackney have been terminated, knowing what you know, which is more than most, more than 99% of us?
Knowing, and this is going to be both a matter of conviction and practicality. My preference would have been if there was some way to have gotten Chief Brackney to work better with others in City Hall, to perhaps take advice from others in City Hall. There are a number of people in City Hall who don't deal directly with the police department, but who have had to deal indirectly with her, and who just found her very difficult to work with. So there are a lot of reasons why, from sort of an institutional perspective, a lot of reasons why that decision is overall a good decision to have made.
Did you watch the mayor's Facebook Live?
No.
I watched it. She pretty much threw I'm going to choose my words carefully here. She threw a lot of people under the bus. She does that often in Facebook Lives. She made an allusion to this being a code or charter violation because council was not made aware of the termination before it happened. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the city code is clear that the police chief is to be treated in this respect. The best example would be a cabinet secretary at the federal level. The cabinet secretary is nominated by the president, is confirmed by the Senate, but can be fired by the president alone. Same thing here. The code is clear that the police chief is nominated, so to speak, by the city manager, is subject to confirmation by council, and that's it. The code and the charter are also very clear that the city manager is otherwise completely in charge of hiring and firing decisions. I don't think there is any issue on that at all.
The partnership, the joint venture, the friendship, whatever we're going to call it, the professional relationship with the mayor and the police chief, did that give a sense of invincibility to the police chief from your vantage point?
I'm not going to speak. I have no idea how she was feeling about it.
Where does City Hall, City Manager Chip Boyles, and City Council go from here with finding a new police chief?
I think that it will be clear, will be made clear when the announcement, looking for applications goes out, that we are going to be looking for a police chief who will continue in the same vein of reform, of looking for what has sometimes been called a 21st century policing model, going from the warrior mentality to the guardian mentality, to put it in the words of Eric Holder's Justice Department in a report they came out with in 2015. That's where I think we're going to be headed, and that's where Chief Brackney said she wanted to go, and that's great. I applaud that. I applauded that, past tense as well as present tense. That's where we're going to be looking for another police chief to do that, but hopefully to do it in a way that just works better.
The public's perspective of City Hall is one of attrition and turnover, one of bickering. It's a tumultuous time to be associated with City Hall right now.
Yep.
How do we correct this? Why are the waters so tumultuous right now downtown Charlottesville?
Well, I think, I've said for a long time, August 12th, 2017 was a bell that rang and continues to vibrate. The vibrations are fading somewhat, but those sounds are still in the air, and the sounds are permeating what we do in a lot of ways that we don't always necessarily understand. So I think it's getting better. I also think that one of the things when we brought in Chip Boyles, we told him his job number one was to repopulate City Hall, to deal with the fact that we had been losing middle managers in particular at a very distressing rate. We over the last 4 years, we've gone through, I guess we're on our fourth city manager at this point. We've gone through about 5 deputy city managers after, frankly, having had no deputy city managers in August of 2017.
City attorneys.
City attorneys, we're on our third city attorney.
Police chief.
Police chiefs. A lot of other leaders in public works, another place like that.
Neighborhood director.
Well, we've only had the one, and Alex got demoted a couple of years ago, and we haven't been able to hire somebody since. We've got
one took the job and then left. And didn't even want to come.
Didn't even make it in the door.
Right.
I think it's fair to say that when he accepted the job with us and he didn't pull his application from Prince William County.
That was a red flag.
We didn't know it at the time. He didn't tell us, oh, by the way, I'm still leaving my application open with Prince William. But when Prince William said yes, he went there. I have not met the new director of NDS who's going to be starting in about 10 days. On his resume, I'm very impressed with him. I think he may be exactly the guy we need to bring along that department, and that will help a lot in a lot of the ways that people interact with City Hall, the way that the developers and contractors and citizens, all the things that they need. A lot of them come through NDS, and to have that department being understaffed and really not being led for a couple of years now has been distressing. So that's one major change we're going to have. I think that we are headed in the right direction. But one of the things that happens, and I think this happened a lot over the last year or so, people when they got to thinking about maybe I want to look for another job, once that psychic bridge is crossed, it's hard to pull them back. If they've already got one foot out the door, I'm now mixing my metaphors, if they've already got one foot out the door, it's very easy to take the other step out the door.
Are you referencing Chief Brackney and the shortlist Dallas police chief job there?
Not specifically. I'm thinking about some of the other positions where people have left. I mean, again, middle management kinds of positions where things that were distressed. Some people, many of them have gone over to Albemarle County because they didn't have to move. Albemarle presents a situation of greater stability at the top. It's quieter.
Yeah.
The tensions are less. Just to use as an example. You could have just as many complaints about police misconduct in Albemarle County as you do in the city of Charlottesville, but you don't hear about any of them. There's no energy, there's no passion like there is associated with the Charlottesville issues. And again, it's a question of where the bell's been ringing.
10 days ago, roughly 10 days ago, we have an unsigned press release, long press release from someone in City Hall that is airing dirty laundry from the Charlottesville Police Department. This unsigned, long press release that's airing dirty laundry is in direct response to the Police Benevolent Association survey that was released to all media, including us here at I Love CVille. Who wrote that press release?
I have no idea.
I know, and I have a lot of respect for this gentleman, I know Brian Wheeler did not write it.
Right, he was out of town.
He was out of town. Brian Wheeler's press releases are short, concise, and signed with his name on the bottom.
Right.
We know when Brian Wheeler writes a press release. So logically, you're a man of logic. For connecting the dots, it would seem it would either be the police chief or the mayor who wrote that. It wasn't you.
It sure wasn't me.
It wasn't Chip Boyles.
It did not come through city council. I know that some of the things that were expressed were the same kinds of things that Chief Brackney said to us 4 days earlier in the meeting that we had. It was a closed meeting to talk about grievance procedure issues and litigation issues and so on. And all the same stuff was said at that point. Certainly, it was written in conjunction with or inspired by, or however
someone
you want to
in the police
characterize it.
department.
Police department.
Yeah.
And who else, I honestly don't know. And let me say, I haven't asked, not because I don't want to know, but just I've got other things to do in my life.
Why? It takes a lot of courage to do what you do. You often, in tough times, difficult circumstances, are willing to speak on the record.
Mm-hmm.
Your colleagues do not do that. Mayor Walker does it in her silo Facebook Live, where she's not really pushed with questions unless the only stuff she gets in her Facebook Lives is from supporters. You speak on the record in challenging times. Why do you do this? And the second part of the question is, would you like to be the mayor next year? That position is up. It's open.
Let me just touch on the second one first. If my colleagues think that I can help, I would be willing to be the mayor. I'm not anxious to be the mayor. Frankly, there are advantages to my sitting off to the side and not having the responsibility of running the meeting. In a properly thought of scheme, the mayor doesn't have any additional power. Has the power has the power to set the agenda.
Has a bigger platform.
Well, more people are going to call the mayor for comment than just Joe Blow councilor. So a slightly bigger platform or bigger megaphone. That's less important to me. Now, the first piece of the question, I'm trying to remember what the first piece
The courage of speaking on the record.
Oh, part of that is, I was a radio reporter before I went to law school. I'm comfortable with broadcast media. But I also feel that it is important, if we're going to talk about things, that first of all, it's important that we talk about things. It is important that people not have a sense of City Hall is a closed shop, nobody's talking. And sometimes when we're all sitting around trying to be politically correct or trying to be restrained and not rush to judgment. I still try to be restrained. I still try not to rush to judgment. But I think we've got to be talking about these things. And there are times when I will say, that's a personnel matter. I'm not going to get into that. I may talk around the edges of it, but I'm not going to get into the exact, advice that we got into. So I'm just, it's more comfortable perhaps for me than for some others.
You got a reporter that covers the City Hall asking this question. Did the unsigned press release lead to Chief Brackney's firing? Because we're logical people. That press release had very detailed information of stuff that transpired in the police department. They were talking about the SWAT team. They were talking about children of SWAT members detonating explosive devices. They were talking about private text message exchanges between police officers and the fraternity nature within the department, if you may. The logical person in me says this is Chief Brackney who wrote this. Do you think that led to her termination?
I don't know, because in my conversations with Chip Boyles, he never said to me, boy, get a load of that press release, But clearly in the 2 weeks or so that intervened, there was a lot of concern in the city manager's office about the way in which these issues were being handled. And concern, certainly I had concerns that I thought the next step was going to be that videos were going to get released to MSNBC, and we were suddenly going to be on the national news for some of this stuff. And I know that there were some members of the police department who said when that press release came out, okay, I'm done. Either I'm quitting or I'm putting my application in someplace else. But that did it for me.
It's like the sports reference. I believe you're a Baltimore Orioles fan. What happens in the locker room oftentimes should stay in the locker room. And when the content that happens in the locker room is released to the media, it creates distrust.
Well, and one of the other problems is we're all told personnel matters are not for public discussion. And so and I think that I am subject to those same constraints that Chief Brackney is subject to, or any police chief. And so when one participant goes beyond where I would not have gone that far, and I might not have been very satisfying to people who wanted to know more details, but I thought that those were details that, at least at this point, were not releasable. And I know that there were some other people in City Hall, didn't speak about it particularly with Chip, other people in City Hall who have shared that concern, that this had gone too far, that this was just too much detail, and it might come out if there's to be a grievance procedure hearing and a fight about things, or some of this might well come out in that process, but not now.
This is a tough question. Is Mayor Walker dividing this city? Is she the lightning rod?
Well, I don't know whether she's the lightning rod. I mean, she is a lightning rod. Let's face it, all of us are to a certain extent. Her lightning rod may stick out a little higher than some of the rest of us. I will say this, she often rhetorically divides the city when she's arguing with me on council,
or Mr. Brown
in public, or Mr. Brown. But with me, she'll sometimes say, the people who support you want this. The people who support me want that. What she loses sight of is that given the margins that each of us won by, at least a third of my supporters voted for her 2 years before, and at least a third of her supporters voted for me 2 years later. We're not that divided a city. And to use that rhetoric, I think, is very harmful and also factually wrong.
I agree with that. The election in November, how do you characterize it?
Well, certainly, you all have characterized it before I got on here as, the most important election in the history of the city of Charlottesville.
You disagree?
Well, I would say that the latest election is always the most important election. This one is particularly difficult for a lot of reasons. And I do think we're at a position where council, if council can work together better, then council can, I mean, we spend a lot of our, at least emotional energy, if not time and other kinds of energy, just trying to figure out where everybody's coming from. And
you guys seem to be walking on eggshells.
It's often got that feel about it. And I know Brian Pinkston and I know Juan Wade, and I have confidence that if they are elected, that we will have, that we'll be able to make progress in many of the same areas that Mayor Walker wants us to make progress in without the same sense of walking on eggshells. It's...
Have you endorsed Pinkston and Wade?
Yeah, both of them. Got their signs in my yard. Sent them both checks.
Where does City Hall go from here? How do we attract talent to open positions that are critically important to moving forward?
What
Consultants leave. Consultants that are literally have money that they want, that are still waiting to be paid to them, say, I'm going to bypass this tens of thousands of dollars and stop working with you guys.
Right.
And not you specifically.
Right.
I mean, City Hall in general. That literally happened.
Yeah, when we were looking to hire a new city manager, once the hiring consultant we had contacted got the information that the mayor was not willing to meet with him separately or off the record, or however you want to characterize it, because she wasn't willing to do that. The result was that he said, I can't deal with this level of dysfunction. I have dealt with plenty of dysfunctional city councils before, but not the internal difficulties like that. So yes, that has happened. I think that one of the things that we have found recently is that although you might think people would say, geez, I don't want to get in the middle of that, the right kind of person looks at it and says, I can make a difference here. And I think Chip Boyles has brought in some excellent people recently who have that attitude of, I can make a difference here. And Chip's demeanor, his method of management, I think people will understand that he's not going to leave them hanging out there. He's going to have their backs. He's going to work collectively and cooperatively. And that's the kind of thing that people who are involved in city government want to be a part of. We can say to them, not only is Charlottesville a great place, but we're turning this thing around, and you can come be a part of that. And we're getting people who want to be a part of it, and that's wonderful.
Where do you see the city 1 year from now?
I hope where we will be 1 year from now is that we will continue to sort of repopulate the city hall and to get more and more of these middle managers going. I hope that by a year from now we will have finally passed the comprehensive plan that should have been passed in 2018. And the comp plan, of course, includes the land use map. It would also include the zoning rewrite. It would include a true implementation strategy for the affordable housing plan. Those are and the other piece that will have happened by that time is that we will have given serious thought and have a real plan worked out for how we're going to move forward on climate change issues. We have committed to that, but it's just one more thing that has gotten pushed off to the side between COVID and staff turnovers. So we'll get that going too.
Ray Cadell, we're lucky to have Lloyd serving our community. Plus, he can sing. You should ask him to do that on this show. We won't ask Mr. Snook, Councilor Snook, to do that on today's show, but he does have the voice of an angel. Councilor Snook,
a bass angel, perhaps.
A bass angel. There we go. To be specific, a couple more questions for you. We appreciate your time. If you have, with the benefit of hindsight, everything you've known now, would you have run for council?
Somebody asked me that on the street today. It was interesting. Yes.
You would?
Yeah. Because I'm like the people I described a moment ago, I don't mind being a part of a difficult situation if I think I can make a contribution to progress.
That's in a lot of ways your job.
Yeah.
That's what you do.
Yeah.
All right, anything else, sir? You have quite a few people watching here, and all the media outlets are watching you here. Anything else that the community should hear, needs to know to help? Is the phrase stabilize the organization? Is that what's been bantered around the phrase?
Sure. And I guess the first thing I would say is that things always look a lot worse than they probably are. The City Council, in spite of all of the dissension, has made a lot of progress on a lot of things. We've put a lot of money. Well, the first thing is we've brought us most of the way through the COVID situation in pretty good shape. If we compare how we've fared versus how various other localities have fared, we've been very fortunate. And we've been pretty well led during that time, starting with immediately right after the fact, Teron Richardson got a really good response team going, and we've started and kept on that. So we've done that. We've reinforced our commitment to affordable housing. We're starting to move forward on the redevelopment of South First Street. Piedmont Housing Alliance is using the city money to rebuild the Friendship Court. So there's a lot of things that are going in the right direction. And we lose sight of that sometimes when we spend all of our time talking about these, more newsworthy issues, I suppose. So I think we're moving in the right direction. I think that particularly, I just think we're blessed to have Juan Wade and Brian Pinkston on the ticket. I hope that they will be victorious, that we can then all work collectively without a lot of the tensions that we've had recently.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Okay.
Yeah. Lloyd Snook, guys, Charlottesville City Councilor, thank you. That's today's show. Today's show, I think, was an impactful show. I'm grateful for Councilor Snook and Mr. Bellamy Brown for joining us. This election in November is an extremely important one. I will continue to say it again. I think it's the most important election in Charlottesville, Virginia history, and I said that before the police chief was fired. Now the police chief has been terminated, and we have to fill the CEO of the Charlottesville Police Department. The next election, those who are elected onto the dais will influence who the CEO of the police department will be. Future land use map, we got Delta variant that's gaining momentum. We got a ton of school infrastructure we need to prioritize. West Main Streetscape project we need to prioritize. The town we love, the town I love, the town you love, the town we're passionate about, that we care so dearly about, undoubtedly in turmoil right now. Undoubtedly in turmoil. And it's time for some consistency in behavior, some consistency in expectations, some consistency within City Hall, where we wake up each day and we don't ask ourselves, what are we going to face today? What are we going to face tomorrow? What news is going to drop that's going to shake the city to its core? There's nothing I would rather have, and I'm saying this as a talk show host that does 20 plus hours a week of live programming. There is nothing I would rather have in the city that I so dearly love than a boring news cycle. A boring news cycle. And we have not had a boring news cycle in Charlottesville, Virginia since what? 2016? 5+ years ago? I want to thank Bellamy Brown. I want to thank Lloyd Snook. I want to thank you guys, the viewers and listeners, for tuning in today. The entire interview will be archived on every social media platform known to mankind, certainly on ilovecville.com. This is the I Love CVille Show, where we try to bring content that is impactful to you in an approachable setting. And that's the I Love CVille Network. You guys enjoyed the 3-day weekend. Take care.